Podmachine launches, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Podmachine has been launched. It's a tool to grow and edit your podcast for you and even manage guests. It takes 48 hours to edit a show and starts from $49 a month for 4 weekly shows. Uniquely, the tool also includes advertising in other podcasts. You can try the service for free, and we understand it can be white-labelled. The hosts of one of the UK's biggest podcasts, Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo, are to take their film review podcast to Sony Music Entertainment. The new show, Kermode and Mayo's Take, launches in early May. There'll also be an additional paid show on Apple Podcasts. Now, the last BBC podcast on April the 1st marked Mayo's last employment with the BBC. So what did he get after 40 years with the broadcaster on some of their biggest shows? He got HR cancelling his security pass while he was still in the building, forcing him to ask for help to get out. They are the worst HR department in the world, and I should know. For those wondering whether the RSS feed from the Geo's previous show on the BBC would redirect, the answer appears to be no. Although, when that Peter Crouch podcast moved from the BBC to Acast last week, the RSS feed didn't forward either, but the BBC did allow them to promote the new feed in a special 20-minute advert in the old feed, which was curious. The Parcast union has threatened to strike, reports Bloomberg in a paid article, claiming no agreement has been reached with management. Parcast is owned by Spotify, and we reported their stalled union negotiations last month. Blue Wire is projecting $10 million in podcast revenue this year. They're predicting 124 million downloads. What is Podcasting 2.0 all about? As Dave Jones has written today in a blog post that we link to from our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net, our report card shows that there's some confusion out there, but it's a vision and the standards to achieve it. The Personalised Podcast Planner has been launched by the podcast host. It's a free tool to help kickstart a new podcast, offering a set of resources tailored to you, your goals and your budget. Commercial Radio Australia and Triton Digital have signed a 3-year extension of the Australian Podcast Ranker. If you're having trouble searching for a podcast on Spotify, well, according to a Spotify support person, search results in Spotify are based on a mix of current and all-time popularity, but vary from user to user. The more streams and followers you have, the higher up you'll appear in search. They say try putting a title in quotes if it's hard to find a podcast you're looking for. And in our experience, removing the word podcast also helps Spotify searches, which is hardly surprising. There are 705,000 podcasts with the word podcast in the title. WordPress plugin PowerPress version 9 has been released with improved onboarding. It's produced by Blueberry, though you can host your podcast anywhere with the tool. And if you're hosting with them, Transistor's podcast website builder now lets you add extra pages. It's great for sponsors, about pages, or other things. In People News, Sarita Wesley has been hired as head of US entertainment podcasts at Sony Music Entertainment's global podcast division. She'll spearhead the division's entertainment podcast strategy and joins from Fresh Produce Media. And Manush Zomorodi is the subject of a RAIN podcast business lunch tomorrow at 12 o'clock Eastern. And in podcast news, with Acast, FT Tectonic, the Financial Times podcast investigating the promises and perils of this new technological age, has begun publishing a new 6-part series covering stories from the front lines of the battle between the US and Canada for global technological supremacy. And Today Explained is now on the radio, with more than 12 public radio stations in the US taking the show. The story that we link to from Current highlights some of the reasons some stations aren't taking the show: fear of competition or just simply not made here. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories in full and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.